Hello, everybody. Can you all hear me? Okay, very good. Good to see you. And we're going to have a good talk today. And of course, so our talk today is going to be on China. We've talked about China a lot. And I thought these last two lectures of the summer program should be on something we've talked before in a sort of a more like a summary, but of course, highlighting some of the issues that are still, extremely important to China and to the world, in fact. So let's see what I've got for today as the agenda is this. I'll, as usual, start off with a little recap, which is my take, as it were, of the week and developments there. It's a sort of a general comment. And then what we're going to be talking about is China rising to meet the challenges. Now, every country has its challenges, and China in particular has had more than most, simply because the population is so vast and the country is so big. So the challenges have been enormous. And also looking at the history, past history of China, it has been very turbulent. And that has been the story. But then if you take a longer sort of picture of China, it's a 5,000-year-old type of civilization. Therefore, as civilizations go, it stands out remarkably as one of those which have endured for thousands of years. And in today's terms, of course, that is very, very sort of significant, because our Western civilization, in a way, is only about 250 years old. Of course, we can go further back and so on to some of the darker periods and other civilization. So China has, anyway, a record which is quite interesting as civilizations go. So we're going to be talking about where they are now. Now, one of the things about China is, of course, the population. Because of the population, they have to sort of do something to deliver on that. Now, we've talked before saying that China is very important. And of course, if we see, right now, what's happening by way of our general comment that I'm making is the developments in Afghanistan. I'll come back to that once I've just gone through this agenda for today. So they have to plan for a plan ahead. And in planning, they've got to address these issues, which are really of big concern to the world. Energy, communications, transport, the water, and of course, the economy and technology, its innovation, and so on. And some of the stats we'll see as we go along. So my general comment, coming back to this, it has to do with Afghanistan. Not a lot in terms of looking at it too deeply, but why is it that Afghanistan is now sort of important? Well, it's important because a 20-year effort by USA and in general the West, I suppose, has had a war in Afghanistan, which now is coming to an end. And the people have been fighting for their sort of country has been the Taliban. And the interim government that was there, which was the Afghan government, they have sort of fled. And now we are going to be seeing an interim government being set up. And now why am I saying all this? Simply because the actions that are taken by some of the big powers do affect the world in many ways. And China is a big power, and it's taking decisions which are important. And China has taken decisions really to sort of serve the people. Although at the back of every sort of country's planning is to serve the people, but unfortunately the models that we follow are falling short in delivery terms. I know that since the Second World War, the world has advanced quite a lot. And some of the institutions that were created at that time, the World Bank, the UN, and IMF, and the WTO, and so on and so forth, the UN, that sort of gave a lot of impetus for development. And of course, the free market sort of helped there considerably. But what it has done is, if you see in today's term, it has made, I think, the rich a lot more richer and the poor probably not that much. Even taking the biggest sort of power, as it were, USA, if you listen to Professor Mahbubani, he says that over the last 50% of the population of USA who are working, they have not seen a growth in their wages for the last 20 years, which means that really the people have not really had an increase in their well-being. And who have profited? Because the stock markets have gone up, and you see, plenty of, points there on of the Dow going up. It's people who've had some capital. They have made big bucks. And big companies have made a lot of money. And they've stashed their money as well abroad and wherever. And they've invested, not necessarily in the USA, but in countries like China, for instance. Now, why am I talking about this, Afghanistan? Well, as Professor Mahbubani says, when the Afghan invasion took place in about the sort of 2001 or thereabouts, something more significant took place at the same time. And that nobody sort of remembers, which is the reason why we are facing China, which is a really mighty giant of China. And that's, at that time, an entry into WTO saw China coming in. So 20 years later, China is where it is because of WTO to a large extent. Because what we see is that, as again, Professor Mahbubani says, 900 million people, workers, if you like, were injected into the global economy, which was really, I think has really what he calls a creative destruction. Because what happened is that all those jobs that were there in the West started to go towards China and to the East. And cheaper products came here because companies, brought the cheaper products over and they invested in China. So really, if you look at what happened 20 years ago, when Afghan invasion started, China was already there doing its thing, which made a whole bit of difference to its economy. So if you look at USA and China in that sort of regard, USA has really messed things up for their own country and for the world, especially when you go to all the other countries that USA has been bombing and doing other stuff. So China has really been rising. And so that's my general comment, that here, the action taken by the politics of that day, 20 years ago, is coming home to roost now because, defeat is quite significant. And China, in place of that, is now rising to the point where Taliban are going over there to talk to them. And of course, the prosperity is there for the Chinese. Okay, now let's coming back to this agenda today. Now, if you look at this, China, as I said, is geared towards helping the people. They keep on saying that. They are for the people, by the people, and of the people. And if you look at China, their system is organized towards delivering for the people through what they call a Mandarin system. And I've talked about it earlier on. A Mandarin system is really a meritocracy-based system. And here on the Western sort of world that we see, USA and Europe, we have a system which is really a democracy, but really not quite a democracy, but a plutocracy, as Professor Mahbubani says again, which means that the capital is where it calls the shots. not the people itself. It's the capital who fund the campaigns and so on. They call the shots. That's why you have this disparity. So one has got to be very clear that if you're going to deliver for the people, then look at people's concerns, not the trickle-down effect of by giving privileges to the top and so on. This is what's happened in the USA recently. So here it is. China has got the biggest sort of population. We make it bigger, yeah. See, Chinese population. Now this is by 2015, by 2050, India will have become the biggest and China the second. Now we'll have to see whether the GDP is going to be in this order. And I'll show you some figures just now, which says perhaps not. Here is the population again expressed in terms of region. Now, why are we looking at population? We're looking at populations because at the end of the day, it's the people that must be served, not, sort of glib talk and sort of, hide the money in tax shelters and, have this pork barrel type of economics in USA. And those sort of ideas are all to do with having to manage the big money for their advantage and not thinking about the people in general. So populations are important. Now, where are the big populations that are going to matter in the future? Africa. Of course, this is Asia. And Europe and all, Asia is here. Sorry, this is the Asia here. Total population in 2015, 2050, 2100. So you can see the world population is going to be mostly Asia, followed by Africa, and then the other sort of continents. So these two sort of countries need to be dealt with that sort of thing at the back of the mind. Here, as I said earlier on, China has done something quite astonishing. It has lifted those 700 million people out of poverty. No other civilization has done that in such a short time. That's in the period of about less than 50 years. So you can see it's a remarkable achievement. And we really need to study how it did it. Okay, we can say, well, it's because of a dictatorship, this, that, or the other. But at the same time, they say, look, we are trying to deliver to the people what the people need, and they have delivered. So, the argument fails and say, oh, well, somebody didn't have his right of speech to say something or the other. So that comes next, I think, because, to try and put food on the table is much more important than to be able to go and shout on the pulpit there or wherever, say, well, I want to be able to have my say. So community rights is what China says need to be taken into account seriously, not individual rights. So here we are, China's GDP. We talked about it, and this is 2020. Already you can see China is catching up 3/4 of USA's GDP. Now, in the next few years, this figure is going to be up there, and it's clear. And in terms of PPP, that's purchasing power parity, not the GDP, but the PPP measure, they've already taken over or gone past USA. So in that regard, China is already the largest economy in the world when you use the PPP as the measure, as the metric. And what is PPP? It's how much purchasing power you may have with the dollars that you have. Not necessarily just the dollars, but what you're able to buy. So if you buy less in USA, that means PPP is less. And if you buy more in China, it means PPP is higher. So China is already taken over as the lead country in that regard. Okay. Now, this is something that I think we should also look at. Now, what has it done for the domestic? We're talking about the domestic advances that China has made. And one of the things that has really made it grow very fast is this here, the e-commerce. Now, when you talk about e-commerce, what it means is the ability to be able to transact your buying and selling using, digital features or facilities that are available. not necessarily, have cash exchanging hands, but to be able to, as we talked about earlier on, there's the digital currency that is already starting to happen in China. And e-commerce has to do with essentially how much of your commerce is done electronically. So here we have China as being the leading economy in the world, and followed by UK here at 27, USA down here, which is really 14%, and of course Germany here at 11%. So here, I mean, these figures may sort of look a little bit odd because we know Germany is very, very sort of rich, and so is USA and UK as well. And China, it's not absolutely rich because, it's got a huge population. But what it's saying here is that the amount of sales as a measure of total retail sales in these countries, they are sort of leading in that sort of in that measure. So now, what are the drivers that have been there for bringing about the electronic commerce and digital currencies and so on? It's this essentially the concern for facilitating the economic activity. So here we have, talking about the digital yuan, because I talked about, you remember, a digital currency, and I also highlighted, for instance, the difference between a digital currency that is versus like a Bitcoin, which is a crypto. They're all cryptos in a way, but the main difference is that, like Bitcoin, it is not backed by any government. It is purely demand and supply that determines the value of a Bitcoin. And we went into that. So if you want to know more about that, you can look at the archive and look at the talk on digital currency. Whereas the government sort of currency, like the digital yuan, is backed by the government. So they have full control in a way. It's not just demand and supply that determines the yuan. It's the full power that the government has in developing its economy and managing its economy. That's reflected in the yuan. So it is backed by the government, whereas the Bitcoin is not. In fact, it's not just China who's looking at this digitization or digital sort of fiat equivalent to currency. Fiat currency is just the banknotes and so on. Digital currency is the numbers that express a value. And we talked about that, the wallets and so on in my last talk. So what we have here is really the fact that China has gone already some way in having a digital yuan. USA is looking at a digital dollar, and soon I think it'll probably have one as well, but it's behind. So this is basically e-commerce, how much is being sort of done. You saw that earlier on. China was way ahead, and it's got these big companies here that are doing that type of e-commerce in China. And in here, Amazon has about a 13% market. And that market of e-commerce is about 3.4 trillion. So here are the other companies that are doing some digital sort of e-commerce. Now, this is again a chart which tells us about e-commerce, how much it has penetrated into the country. Now, these big blue bubbles are the place here. If you look at this here, it's the amount of money, the average money that a person earns in a country. So here it's USA is $45,000, and here it's the percentage of that money going into e-commerce. It's about only 10%. So 10% of that purchasing power that you have in all these countries is being sort of use in e-commerce. So most of the world, if you like, here, this is Europe here, and but where is China? China is over here. Now China is nearly 20%, and yet the people who are even earning $5,000 a year are able to use that. So you can see this chart is saying how much it has penetrated into the society of the country. So it's a very important type of thing to know as well. Okay, we talked about this digital currency, but just to recap very quickly, China's national grid digital currency will be built with a blockchain and cryptocurrencies. We talked about blockchain and crypto last time. So this is just, blockchain is one which is a decentralized ledger, if you like. And crypto is, of course, to ensure that the security is there. So here we've got the first one that China has come up with. It's backed by its central bank. They call it the central bank digital currency. So it has, the backing of the government. Oops. Sorry. Yeah. The goal and objective of the currency are to increase the circulation of the RMB. RMB is the domestic currency, whereas yuan is their international currency and international reach, and eventually hopes that the RMB will be a global currency like the US dollar. So here we have really a move by the whole country toward digital sort of currency to facilitate so many other things. What are the things, how are they approaching it? We talked about the super apps last time as well, Alipay and WeChat. We've got also a few of these things that we do, like PayPal. PayPal enables you to purchase and do all sorts of things with it. It hasn't really become big. PayPal, by the way, was started by Elon Musk. So he's really quite far ahead with all these type of things. So here, these super apps enable you, just by a login into that app, to be able to say, order a taxi or make a payment or buy a ticket for the opera or whatever it may be. So it makes it a lot easier. These are the super apps. Okay, how does it help the government? Why does it want to bring this digital currency? It helps the government to accurately manage and properly regulate the social wealth. It improves financial management of enterprise by increasing their work efficiency. It makes payments easier, safer, and harder to fake. It's also expected to give birth to new business models, promoting the development of China's digital economy. So there are benefits to be had, because digital means that you can get instant information as to how much has been spent here, there, or wherever, and by whom. Now, what happens is that if the digital yuan becomes quite freely used, then the dollar, which is the international dollar of the is going to have its demand less. So it may become a big threat to the standing of USA in its global sort of role if the dollar, international dollar, gets used less. Anyhow, okay, what are the things that is China doing to try and meet the challenges to serve its people? Is developing these high-speed trains. Now, these high-speed trains, they run at over 400 kilometers an hour. And it's not just like a one sort of link that like we have in HS1, for instance, and we are putting an HS2 now up to Manchester or thereabout. This is, it has an extensive network of over 20,000 miles. Yeah, this is again, they're advancing very, very rapidly on making it faster and faster. This speed is up to about 620 kilometers an hour. Maglev is magnetic levitation type of thing. We talked about it in one of my earlier talks. So if you like, you can go back to my archive again and pick up where I've talked about the rails. This is just a bit of a recap on some of that. Okay, with speeds of 350, it can meet the demand for fast freight as well, because freight is very, very important to move around for your economy. It can operate in all conditions. Now, this is very important because in China, you've got a lot of permafrost as well, especially if you look towards Tibet and all that. It's high ground, and over summer it sort of causes all sorts of issues. So you need to have tracks which are able to provide you with regular service. Now, China has become the first country in the world to realize such high-speed freight, marking a significant improvement of China and innovation in rail transport. So you can see the infrastructure it's building. So here we are. This is saying basically it can operate in extremely low temperatures as well, up to -40 as well. Here we are, -40. And it can sort of, and at -40, most things sort of would freeze and not work. And when it comes summer, if it goes to 20 degrees even, then the whole rail system gets soggy and swampy. So you need to have technology that works on the rail and on the trains as well. Yeah, this is basically repeating the same thing. Now, one of the things that is there, which I suppose should really be in my next lecture, which is to do with international, but you see the trains that they are developing, they can work, especially if they have to cross borders, they will be able to change their gauge. The gauge is the width of the rail. And if you go from one country to another, the widths are different. I think in Europe, it's practically the same. But if you go from, say, China into Pakistan, or Iran, or Pakistan into Iran, the gauge changes. That's a sort of a historical type of feature that is left behind. Anyway, these trains are able to change their gauge, and that facilitates them going from any country to another country without having to stop and transfer the load. Yeah, this is again saying about the rail. Let's move on with that. Now, if you look at the comparative sizes of China and Europe, you can see the blue is China, and Europe is this white part here. So you can see that China is as big as Europe. So if Europe is smart enough to be able to have a European Union, it can in fact match, if you like, China. Of course, UK having shot itself at the foot, they're coming out of it, and they're going to, I think UK is going to suffer because of that. But Europe can lead the way along with China in the future. USA, with all its politics, if it doesn't get its politics right, here you see the advantage of Europe is that you economically you have come together, and culturally you're still diverse, which they have managed to do, which is a fantastic thing to be able to do. USA hasn't been able to. USA is still early. It's sort of had the advantage of having free land and free labor from slaves coming in. So it made the wealth. But Europe, I think, is the old sort of way it has struggled to sort of make its way up to the top. And it can do so seeing China and working closer with China. This is just a thing, the time travel 1 to 4 hours. And they're planning their network in such a way that you don't have to go more than 4 hours to get to any of the cities which are populated, over 500,000. This is the network. It's about 24,000 sort of miles. If you take the whole world, fast network of the whole world, it's still smaller than what China has. Now, these are different types of speed type of networks. We don't need to look at it in great detail. Okay, market growth. And so what does an infrastructure do? Infrastructure promotes business, economy, and so on. So you need to be able to, and movement of passengers and freight. Yes, so it says that China spent more than $1 trillion for the construction of high-speed rail. So you have basically, an emphasis in China by giving the opportunity to people to travel faster, to sell freight, and then promote basically their well-being. So this is why in my next lecture, I'm going to be talking more about the infrastructure, because one is not promoting, as it were, democracy, or as communists wanted to promote socialism, but China is promoting the well-being through the economy. So this is why it's succeeding, because the world needs the well-being of its people. Everybody wants the well-being of its people if they follow the right sort of practices. But if they get sidetracked by some of the other things, then of course one is not going to make that much progress. And that's why China has made so much progress. So these are the convenience of all, what the advantages of having good infrastructure. Okay. Again, basically, you know, they're giving autonomy to various parts of China, and hopefully they're going to stop the cessationist movements or aspirations by giving everybody economic well-being. You know, we hear about Uyghurs and all that, they're here. And China is very developed on this side, on the east. And now they're trying to bring in the economic well-being here through the Belt and Road and through this Gwadar thing we've talked about many times. So the well-being is going to come here and stop all this thing in about the Uyghurs. Now, one of the things about China is that it's got a lot of water, because it's got the high ground there, the plateau of Tibet, and all these rivers emanate from that. And it is quite a gift in a way. Here we are, and what can they do with all that water? They have got a desert area here. They're going to be able to use that to green it, and they've already got plans, and plans are there to put canals to bring the water from the south to the north here, and to also to have for the cities. I'm going to rush through a little bit here. Yeah, this is the green wall that they're building, and work has already started quite a bit there. Now, these are the various geography of China, and then some of the rivers here, as you can see, high ground and low ground. Anyway, that's just for our knowledge about the big rivers, the Wangho and the Yangtze. And there's a lot of water here. And this water, and of course, these other Brahmaputra, two big rivers of India, they also emanate from China. And that's one of the places of tension. I talked about that earlier on in another of my lectures. Yeah, we'll skip that. Essentially, they're building canals to transfer the water from the Yangtze and Huangho to meet the needs of the desert, or greening of the desert over there, and also to build a huge city for 130 million people. Because as we said, the population of China is going to be growing. And if you're a government, which is a responsible government, you're going to cater to the needs in the future. And that need is very clearly to be able to have water provision. Of course, here, I'm skipping over this because, it's just basically to remind you that these are the canals that are already there. In my earlier talks, we've talked about it. That's the same thing about the canals being put and the water being taken over to this new city that's going to be built here. It's going to combine these Beijing and Tianjin and Hebei into a mega city called Jingjinji. Just more about that here. This is just to say that the ASEAN rivers are also emanating from Tibet, and therefore China has an immense amount of control over that. Yeah, another thing, in order to sort of try and improve the lot of the Uyghurs, they're going to build a 1,000-kilometer tunnel to bring the water to the Xinjiang desert. Because, the Uyghurs live in an area which is mostly desert, and therefore by bringing in water into that Xinjiang region, they're going to sort of really make a big difference. This is a canal that they're going to be building, hopefully. Yeah, this is water politics. Let's not go into that right now. We'll come to, and this is also Pakistan has its origin of its rivers in China, because the Indus also has this in Kashmir and China and all that, and therefore this water politics is very important for the future. This is a city that China is intending to build, Beijing and Tianjin, and Hebei. So it's going to be called Jingjinji. It's 430 million people. And they're going to have the functions given to them as well. This Xinjiang will be a very much industrial. Then you've got Beijing, which is going to be much more government and so on. And Hebei, much more to do with agriculture. That's not to say that everything is still going to be mixed, but the emphasis is there. And because it's huge, the transport needs to be sorted out. And they're going to be able to make it such that they have extremely fast trains to take you from one end to another. So the commute time is reduced enormously, and yet people can have, in fact, a good living rather than just having high rises. This is the canal that they're building from the Yangtze right up to the top there to take you the water. Okay, that's the same. That's the sort of 130 population city that is coming up. This is the airport that's going to serve that. It's by the Syrian architect lady who's dead now. Hadid, her name is Hadid. Very, very, modern thing there. So if you are able to sort of deliver that, and already they have plans for it, so it's a matter of implementing it. Okay, well, about power. Power, because they're growing so fast, they need lots of power. They've already got hydropower in this Three Gorges Dam, which gives you a lot of water. I think it's the order of about, it's taken 22 billion to make. And it can give you, I think, 22 gigawatts of electricity, clean energy. So you can see 22 gigawatts is a 22,000 megawatts. That's quite a lot. And they're building the world's largest wind dams, wind farms, that will also sort of provide humongous amount of power. Here we are, 20 billion spent on that, because China is a big contributor of pollution at the moment. I'll show you a graph in just a moment. So this is so the total wind generated electricity produced by all the United Kingdom, and but through its clean energy thing, it's already producing a lot more than what UK produces. Yeah, these are the sort of solar panels that are being used. They've also got nuclear power. They've got 31 reactors and 24 under construction. These are all where the nuclear power stations are going to be based. Now, this is the pollution, because China is growing so rapidly, and it's become really the workshop for the world in many ways, especially when it joined the WTA 20 years ago. You remember I mentioned earlier on? So it's the biggest polluter, and they have a desperate need to try and convert very quickly. Here is China, followed by the United States, the next biggest polluter, and then the European Union, and then India. Now, of course, we talked about communication, because communication is also a big necessity for a big population growing, and for society to sort of, engage in livable sort of relative comfort. 5G is already operating there. I told you before, we haven't got 5G as yet in terms of its full extensive functionality. We've just got a little sporadic bits here and there. Because, Trump sort of put out this note saying that, the 5G Huawei was going to steal all your data, and therefore it's a political game that gets played. But that means that UK is going to suffer, and so is Europe as well, because they've been following USA, and taking the lead from it, which I think is a shame. They should assert themselves a bit more. Now, 5G capacity is 20 times that of 4G. So you can see, you can have enormous amount of exchange of data taking place, especially when the cars become self-driving and so on. Yeah, we've got, in China, already 300 cities have got this 5G network already operational. This is self-drive cars. They're testing it out, and 5G is very important because you need to be able to instantly be able to take decisions. If a cat sort of runs across you, you need to be able to detect it and stop it very quickly, and you need to be able to respond, not necessarily just for that, but for other reasons as well. This is freight being carried by electric trucks. So you can see the electric sort of means are coming in very fast. There were so many other aspects as well, which I won't go now because we used up about 40 minutes of our time. So I'll give you the next 20 minutes for our Q&A. Okay. Let me just unmute you. Oh, you can unmute yourself. I think you have to do it yourself. So you can unmute. And we'll make a view, which is a gallery view.
That was an amazing gallop over so much information.
I know. Sorry about that. But I thought it probably useful to be able to bring that to its logical sort of conclusion of the summer talk.
Yeah.
Because so much is happening in the world. And we need to understand where things have gone wrong. And particularly Afghanistan is highlighting that so clearly.
Yeah.
Whereas at that same time, when China was, 20 years ago, China became part of the WTO, and nobody really sort of saw the impact. And we are still pursuing Afghanistan. And it's a good thing that Biden had a lot of courage to admit that things have been, taken wrong decisions by all these people. And hopefully there's going to be better decision making in the future.
Who knows?
What do you think of...
You don't think so?
Two questions in
I'd like you to be a bit of an optimist, hopefully.
Safiq, what do you think of China's liaison now with the Taliban? They're willing
Well,
to...
the Taliban as a delegation went over to China about a week ago. And China's policy has been to keep out of the politics of Afghanistan, because it saw that USA was embroiled in Afghanistan and was not going to win a war at all. And it was just a matter of time when it had to go. And what it had been doing, China, is that they have been quietly working behind the scenes by building schools and helping them in various little ways, which became quite acceptably, happily accepted by the local people. Now, the Taliban say, we are the local people. So if they don't have an army, they don't have aircraft, they don't have anything organized in that way. So it's really the people themselves. If you look at the Taliban soldier, I mean, he has broken sandals to wear. And the only thing that he has, apart from his normal wearing clothes, is a gun over his shoulder. So for $10 is what he's paid by the Taliban. For $10, they've got a soldier, and for USA, they've got a soldier who's equipped with over $100,000 worth of equipment, or even more. So you can see first of all, the basis for bringing about a change into another country this particular way through a military solution has proven unsuccessful, and it's a clear case. We've seen this time and again everywhere, and yet it seems to be the way that decisions seem to be being made. And you can see why that happens, because war means big business for the big sort of moneyed people. And that is the one that drives, basically decision making, which is very unfortunate.
Thank you for clarifying everything about e-commerce and everything, which I know very little, but you really clarify it in a most delightful
Okay, I'm very
way.
glad. I'm very glad.
Is China a military threat? Excuse me, is China a military threat? I put two questions in chat. Is China a military threat to the world? Most likely China might cause a war in the future.
Well, one thing, David, I'm glad to see you here again. You see, any war that is going to be fought, which is going to be a serious hot war, is going to destroy the countries. Nobody wants to go for that type of war. Because if China decides to go to war with the USA, which is very unlikely, it means that it will get destroyed, and in the process, it will destroy USA as well. The bad option, mutually assured destruction, you know. So I don't think there's going to be a military solutions that can be. This military solutions have been what I would call the historical type of model. Big armies, big this, big that, and that sort of thing, you know, that sort of worked for those days. But now the thing that works is really a big economy. How much you can do with what you are able to have in your country, how much innovation you can bring about, how much bettering of lives of people you can bring about. So that is the strength that one should go for. So the old models of strategic advantage and threats, I think, are misplaced, I think, in my view.
But what do you think about economically, they could be having a war between the USA and China?
Yeah, you can call it either a competitive.
Competition is a better word, yeah.
You see, the model of a free market is competition. That is the fundamental heart of a free market. If you have competition, that you have lower sort of costs and also meet the demand. That is the model, right? If you go for war, then you're protecting up walls. That means that you are then becoming, you're not able to compete. And why can't you compete? You can't compete because you haven't got the good training of your manpower or a good infrastructure, or if you like, you know, good productivity. So the moment you go for a trade war and putting up barriers and walls like what Trump is doing, it is clearly saying, look, we are not up to the job. We can't meet the challenges. We are going to sort of close our doors and believe that we are safe. And this is in our good. That's a completely a misunderstanding of one's own system and politics and country and society.
What do you think about the space race now? Because China seems to be right up there now. It's doing wonderful things.
Yeah, space race is an interesting thing, Macy, because you know, China has been excluded from the space station. So it wasn't given any leeway there at all. And what it has done is it says, okay, fine, since I'm excluded, I'm going to have to build my own space station. So it put up a space station itself. And now it's got a space program, which is, they've put a lander on the moon as well. They've sent a lander on Mars as well, you see. So they are now moving to be able to say to the world that they're here. Now, Professor Mahbubani makes a very good thing about assertive behavior versus aggressive behavior. China is being assertive, not aggressive. So, David, in terms of the threat, you know, the war and so on, I would say one needs to be able to understand and read China to be able to respond properly. But if we don't read China properly, then we are going to take bad decisions, as we have done in Afghanistan and elsewhere in the world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you please America withdrew from Afghanistan? I take it you're pleased America withdrew from Afghanistan.
Sorry, David, I didn't get
Should
that.
America have stayed in Afghanistan longer?
Oh, I see. They should have stayed in Afghanistan longer. Is that the question?
Yes, I do think he was right to withdraw.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that would have helped, because sooner or later they would have had to come out. See, 20 years later, one is coming out after having an enormously big army of 150,000 soldiers, foreign, in the country. So with all the things going, staying longer will not help further.
We shouldn't have gone. I think you think we shouldn't have gone. Should we have gone to Afghanistan in the first place? Should we have gone into Afghanistan in the
Oh, this
first
is
place?
about China. We should go on with China.
Yeah, I can't make out your question, David.
Should we have gone into Afghanistan in the first place?
Sorry, what again?
Should we have ever gone into Afghanistan?
Not
in the
at
first
all,
place?
not at all. Not at all, because you see, what had happened was that, you see, if you look at the larger picture, when Russia was there, it was a good enemy that was defined right after the Second World War by USA as having, because you see, if you have a bogey and an enemy, you can spend a lot of money on armament and soldiers and have a big defense budget. So you create an enemy. Now, after the Soviets fell, the second enemy that happened was the terrorism, Islamic terrorism. So they went to war into all these countries to try and sort of, stop that. It is unnecessarily an overreaction to things that have happened in the past. So if you look at the decision makers that have taken such a decision, you can see they have been wrong with the USA. They have been wrong with the terrorist battles that are going on everywhere in the world. And now if they make China into an enemy, again, it's a false step. So if you keep on making bad decisions, then the decline that has started of USA and of the West generally is going to continue even faster.
May I ask another question, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Macy.
I would love to have your impression about China and human rights. We see how wonderfully she's doing on all these other fields, but she seems not to be doing very well in that one, human rights.
Well, one of the things that China is doing is, this thing about the concentration camps and all that. You see, this is a bit of a propaganda, because what China is saying, if you listen to what they are saying, they want to retrain these people because they're all very poor. And if you retrain them, then they're going to be able to have factories built there so that their lives improve. And now with that BRI becoming so important for bringing in goods and services into countries and tying it to China, they're saying that they're going to pass through the Uyghur country, which is the Xinjiang, and therefore they need to have people who are able to, man the requirements of work. Now, China doesn't gain anything by sort of, killing off people. It wants to be able to have a prosperous China and a peaceful China. So it is against their interest to do anything which is damaging that.
But all the evidence shows that they're absolutely trying to eradicate their identity. There's so much evidence, really. One has just to see interviews, etc. It seems to be a very inhuman way in which they're trying to do this.
Yeah, but when I see about the other advancements that China has done elsewhere in China, even Tibet, for instance, by building those railways, because it was impossible to build a railway to Tibet. And I think one of my talks, I told you how they overcome the sort of problem of building a railway, because with that technique that they use, they're building in a similar way railways in Alaska and in Siberia and elsewhere in Canada, because that technique works for permafrost type of grounds. So they have done that to Tibet. Now they're thinking of putting a big canal from of water to the Xinjiang desert. Now these are humongously big projects in order to bring about prosperity. Now it is very easy for poor people to be able to be, misled, or the surrounding countries, which is all Muslim there, they are also not very, very sort of well off, especially after the fall of the Soviet Empire. So with this BRI, what is happening is that it's opening Central Asia and the Xinjiang region so that they are able to now have access to ports and to rail links and to other countries. So prosperity is going to come with the infrastructure. So I feel that there are a lot of counter arguments when you hear about China's sort of doings. It's presented not in the best of lights. So I would not necessarily buy everything that we read.
But would you justify her policy in Hong Kong, for instance?
Well, Hong Kong has been, they made an agreement, right, that they are going to sort of have a one country, two system. And that policy is still being pursued because they don't have the Hong Kong system in all of China. China still follows the old system, and Hong Kong has its own advanced sort of type of arrangement. But what they are saying is they're saying, we want to ensure that Hong Kong, it doesn't pose a security threat to the domestic parts of China. Because, you know, as things are not so sort of clear cut in this world, when there is an opportunity, the other countries try to do you in. And we can see this time and again in every country. If there is an enemy, the enemy tries to do you in, taking advantage of one thing or another. So in a way, I think they're trying to manage that. This is the story that they give me. Now, whether I have you know, a right to sort of make a judgment on whether it's moral or immoral, I mean, I leave it to those people to see what the end result is going to be. If it's going to be for the betterment of a larger number of people, then I think it may not necessarily be a bad thing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah. So Jill, you're very quiet today. Hello, Jill. Can you hear me? Oh, sorry. Lily, sorry. I
Oh,
called
yes,
you by
I
the
can hear you.
wrong name, Lily.
Lily, yeah. No, I'm a bit overwhelmed. I know you are. Sorry, I'll leave it till next time. I think there's too much. It's got to sink in slowly.
Yeah. Well, look at this thing in a bit more detail at your own leisure time.
Yeah,
And see some of the slides that I put up there that'll jog your memory a bit as to
Yeah.
what I talked about.
yeah.
Because I know I have rushed through that.
Mhm.
Simply because, you know, we need to finish up in an hour.
Yeah,
and we've
yeah.
got about
Life's
3
too
minutes
short,
left.
as they say. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, very welcome. Thank you so much for your contributions, and seeing you again, maybe
Thank
for
you
my
very
last
much.
lecture, summer lecture next week. And
Yes.
we'll talk a bit more about the international sort of issues involved. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
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 Thank you.